Hi guys, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Miss Uche. I'm one of the engineering teachers here at TC. And who you guys are going to be meeting with today is one of my really good friends, Anna Pollock, and her husband, Alvaro Argueta. And they are going to be traveling to Guatemala next week. Is that right, next week? To start a documentary film that they're creating called Disposable Addiction. So they're going to be looking at the waste in Guatemala and, just kind of shedding light on some of the issues that exists there. So we're really excited to invite them here. Anna and I first met at the University of Rochester up in Western New York, where we attended college. And then I got to meet Alvaro a few years ago. So we're really excited that they're here to join us at TC Williams. Thank you all for coming, and hopefully you get some good information from them. So welcome, guys.
Hi everyone, good to see you. I'm Alvaro, I'm from Guatemala. I have been living here in DC for 1 year, more or less. And we started to get interested in this subject when we had a family vacation in Mexico. You guys are gonna see a little short clip of one alligator that really impacted me the most. That alligator is the reason that we're here. And, well, here's that.
Yeah. I'm Anna. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I grew up near Vienna in Oakton. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I moved to Guatemala to do some work. I'm just working. To do some work in public health, and I was running some community health campaigns, and that's where I met Alvaro. And from the time that I was living there, we noticed that there's really trash everywhere in Guatemala. There's a lot of plastic on the side of the roads. There's not a good infrastructure for how the trash is managed once it's so here you put your trash in the trash can and then you don't think about it, it's gone. But in Guatemala, there's nobody managing that trash. So even if you put it in the trash can, it's just there to stay. And it was something that really bothered us, and we talked about it for years. And every time that we would go back to Guatemala, we would say, like, look, oh my God, there's so much trash. We should do something. And so finally, we decided that we're going to do something. And we're going to Guatemala, like Jen said, next week. And so we're going to show you first a little clip of a video that we made as a fundraiser. We launched a campaign on Kickstarter to raise $15,000 to pay for the video. And we just reached our goal yesterday. So that's really exciting. And so this is the video that we showed on that campaign. And then after the video, I guess we can talk a little more about what we're going to do, and then we can open the floor for questions.
Okay, you guys in this side can see the screen? Okay, cool. Hi everyone, my name is Alvaro Argueta. I'm a filmmaker from Guatemala.
And my name is Anna Pollock. I'm a public health professional from Washington, D.C. Together, we're going to be making a documentary about a subject that's really near and dear to our hearts.
This is the Anacostia River in Washington, D.C. This is Tilapita, a small community on the Pacific coast of Guatemala. This is the Cañón del Sumidero National Park in Chiapas, Mexico. What do all three of these places have in common? All of these waterways are filled with disposable products, most of them made of plastic.
What impacted me the most was being in Cañón del Sumidero in Chiapas and see this alligator laying down on the beach. But the beach wasn't made out of sand, it was made out of plastic. And the alligator has his head on the top of a plastic bottle as a pillow. That was so powerful for me.
I spent months walking around in the rural communities, and there was trash everywhere, even in the most rural places, chip bags and plastic bottles. I felt like I had to do something. The documentary focuses on the El Naranjo watershed, located in the department of San Marcos near the Mexico-Guatemala border. The watershed spans from the highest mountains all the way to the Pacific coastline. Small rivers cross the terrain, intersecting and becoming larger rivers, ultimately converging in one outlet to the sea. near Tilapa. The vast majority of the 650,000 people who live in the watershed don't have access to garbage collection services. Without access to services, communities have been forced to designate public land along the riverbeds as dump sites. Illegal, unsanitary, and disease-producing, all of this trash runs downstream with the water, ultimately dumping into the ocean. El Naranjo is just one example of the degradation taking place across all of Guatemala's watersheds. But the problem is old news, and it's only part of the story.
Meet small craft operator Chris Jones. He's responsible for keeping 15.4 miles of shoreline along the Anacostia and Potomac
Son
rivers.
rellenadas con residuos plásticos, las cuales servirán para elaborar ecoladrillos.
Con la bolsa plástica y eso vamos a usar como ladrillo para una construcción de nueva aula para los niños.
Our goal is to emphasize the solutions. With support from the San Marcos Ministry of Natural Resources and CARE Guatemala, we plan to follow activists, waste pickers, and government officials as they fight to pass legislation to clean up Guatemala's waterways. We'll spotlight NGOs, social enterprises, and businesses already implementing eco-friendly activities. Education and awareness are the first steps to change. We can't wait. If we want future generations to enjoy a clean environment, the time to act is now.
It is our hope that this documentary first inspires you as an individual to change your lifestyle and use less of the Earth's resources. And secondly, to come together as communities and influencing groups to ultimately impact public policy in this space. With your support, we can manifest these ideas into real-world change. Please check out our page for all the ways that you can contribute.
Well, this is a short introduction of what we're planning to do. As you guys see, the images are kind of strong. The problem is huge. We feel like the story of David and Goliath. We're trying to focus on the solutions more than in the showing the problem, because everybody knows about the problem. So when we started to focus on the solutions, a lot of NGOs and organizations came to us and they said, well, we want to be part of this. We want to be part of the solutions. And that's where we're going to focus. We don't want to make another sad documentary about children dying or children suffering in the middle of the trash. The way to do this a little bit better is showing the solutions and start a movement. That's our goal. Start a movement and change the behaviors of the people. Like, for example, if you go buy a coffee, bring your own mug or bring your own cup. If you're gonna buy something in the supermarket, buy things that are in cardboard or in paper bags instead of plastic. So I think we can start make changes in our own house, like stop buying so much plastic and start changing our behaviors.
So I think it's the context of the video is a little bit interesting, because originally there was a town in the beginning of the video that shows a beach covered in trash, and that's a beach that Alvaro and I have been visiting for many years, and we noticed that every time that we would go back, the beach had more and more trash on the beach, and sometimes we would go at Christmas and it would be really clean because somebody had come along and cleaned up all the trash, because that's when the tourists go. But if you go any other time during the year, there's so much trash on the beach. So our original idea was to go to this beach and make a short documentary about the story of how that trash is coming on the beach and how it's affecting. It's a small town of maybe like 20 families. It's a really, really small town, and it's separated from like the mainland by a river. You have to take a boat to get there, and that trash you go on the beach and you feel like overwhelmed by the amount of trash that there is on the beach. And so originally we thought to make a documentary just about that story. But then as we were doing some research, we actually noticed that there's a lot of documentaries right now, even short documentaries that show up like on your Facebook feed or even on the news about ocean plastic and all of the trash that's in the ocean. It's becoming sort of a hot topic, I guess, in certain circles. And so we started talking when we were in Guatemala in May a coworker of mine who's Guatemalan, who lives there, mentioned, I was talking about this idea that we had to go make a documentary about the trash in this one town. And he said, oh, I'm from there. I'm going to put you in touch with another organization. And so that comment led us eventually to the local government, or the state government, who said that they had noticed, the Ministry of the Environment, they had noticed also that there was a lot of trash, and there was some groups of community members that are starting to organize around figuring out what solutions they can do as community leaders to start to pick up the trash or to prevent the trash from coming down the river into their community. And so we started talking to that guy, and they were the ones who really gave us the idea to focus on a watershed. So watershed is obviously, it's a demarcated area of certain rivers, and they all come together into one big river, and that one big river goes out into the ocean near this beach where we saw in the film. And they basically said, like, you can go to Guatemala and you can film trash for days or for weeks. You know, there's trash everywhere, unfortunately. And so we decided that the best goal for us is to look at the trash in terms of a watershed and start. Guatemala is a really mountainous country, so the watershed starts way up high in the mountains, and then the rivers come downstream basically until you get to the coast, and they're affecting the different communities at different levels. So in the highlands, for example, the communities don't have any access to trash collection services, so they're forced to basically dump their trash in just public land or on the side of the rivers because there's no pickup truck or dump truck that's coming in to pick up their trash. But as you go downstream, the trash from the higher communities is coming down the rivers, and it's affecting the communities farther down. And those communities also don't have necessarily access to services, but they're also dealing with the trash that's coming down the river. And so by the time you get to the coast, those communities are being inundated with trash. And so originally we got the idea that we'll just focus on looking at the problem within the watershed. But then Alvaro can talk a little bit more about the process of framing a story when you make a documentary, but we realized that nobody is going to, first of all, contribute to our Kickstarter, and second of all, nobody is going to be interested in just watching a movie that's like 2 hours of images of trash at different levels. And so then we thought, well, what if we talk about the solutions that are going on? And like Alvaro said, there's really interesting solutions that are happening in Guatemala. You can see a little bit in the video, there's people that are building schools where the foundation is plastic bottles stuffed with other pieces of plastic trash, and those foundations are more stable in earthquakes. But there's like certain political officials that are starting to pass laws, like a bag tax law, or like proposing laws to ban plastic altogether. What else? There's companies that are producing, for example, water filters or reusable bags instead of using plastic. And so there's a whole like micro set of movements that are happening, but they're really small, and those people don't necessarily have the funds to get on national television to make videos that are going to be on the international news. And so the communities that are really isolated, like the ones that we're going to go film in the watershed, they don't know what's going on in the rest of the countries, and they're just in a certain sense stuck there with all of their trash and not really aware of what kinds of things they could implement. So our goal is to basically make like a menu of solutions that are already happening in Guatemala and show those solutions back to the rest of the Guatemalan public that's suffering from the same problem. I don't know if you...
Yeah, basically we want to create this platform of different organizations that are working on the problem, put it together and show it to the rest of the country. For then the places that are like really isolated, they can have access to this information, this type of solutions, and try to integrate it in the different parts of Guatemala. What is really difficult is in Guatemala there exist 21 languages besides Spanish. So each community in the mountains, they have their own language, their own dialect, and it's really difficult to spread the word in all this different spectrum. But what we want to do also is like get a short version of the video, like 15 minutes version, because if you go to a school showing a 1 hour and a half documentary, kids get really bored, and that's where you have to be creative as as a filmmaker and edit a short version of making interesting. I think it will be a challenge for us to do this, but now we are embarked in this project, and hopefully we're gonna make it. As I said before, it's David versus Goliath, because the companies are producing plastic as we're speaking here. Millions of plastic bottles, millions of plastic bags, and it's gonna be a really good challenge to start. Yeah, I don't know, guys, if you have any questions, we're gonna start answering the questions, and yeah. Go ahead.
So my question is,
Can you say your name and maybe
my
what
name is
year you are?
Gabriel Hendy. I'm a junior TC. So basically, you guys were talking about how like your goal in the project is to like get like the solutions going on in like parts of Guatemala and like kind of expose it to like the rest of the country, so like everyone can try and like have their best effort to like try and like fix the problems. So why not? And you were talking about like shortening down to 15 minutes. Why not like make a kind of like playing devil's advocate, if you will, that like why not just make a shorter video, kind of getting straight to the point about like why are you guys choosing to like make a 1.5 hour like documentary on it, opposed to just like making a film like just about like the like solutions and like kind of shorten to the point to like make it more.
I think the reason it's gonna be 90 minutes is the standard of a documentary that you can show in different platforms, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason it's 90 minutes is because the problem and the solutions are so complex that I don't think we can abark this in 15 minutes. And yeah, and as the time we're planning this, a lot of organizations are reaching to us right now. Like we want to be involved. We have this really good idea, and I think we can compress all that version, all of that information in a 15-minute version, just because we want to show it in the schools. But otherwise, the 90-minute version is gonna be more natural, I think, telling the stories, because in a documentary you tell stories, right? Mm-hmm. So you can put all the information in 15 minutes, and mostly if they're long stories to tell. Mm-hmm.
I think that the main audience that we're trying to target is a Guatemalan audience. So like, obviously we would like to put this film when it's finished into, for example, like the DC Environmental Film Festival and other film festivals around the country, but our main audience is the Guatemalan population. And so I think that the first places that we would try to show it are like in cultural centers in Guatemala, in Guatemala City, and in some of the other cities around audiences that are already like open to these kinds of ideas. And then from there, I guess that the shortened version would be like for little kids in the schools, where you can't go to class and watch an 1.5 hour video, because you would have to break it up into 2 days and then you lose like the thread of the film. So we would make something shorter that at least starts to get at the consciousness of the kids or of some of these really remote communities, and then we would have this second version for people here that really don't know anything about the problem, and that would probably benefit from more context, both in terms of the problem and the solutions.
Yeah,
thank you.
And the editing process is also different, because you have to put some call to action text, and you have to make it visually more interesting for the younger audience. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Ahmed Eldwa. I'm also a junior here. So I was wondering, as far as sort of Western audiences go, what makes you feel like a documentary about the solutions would be more compelling than the standard of documentaries being about the problems and making it really sad and such?
So I don't know if it's going to be more compelling, honestly. It's possible that people want to see sad documentaries, but I feel like Alvaro and I, as people who have lived in Guatemala. Alvaro, obviously, he lived there his whole life, and I lived there for a few years. But, you know, there's something to me about this narrative of just like sad people in developing countries that can't do anything for themselves, that are just like stuck and they're not getting out of their problems. It's like, it's depressing, and it's not true. There's so much innovation that's happening in developing countries, and unfortunately, that's not the narrative that we see in today's media on TV and in the movies. It's really like, look at these poor people. They're stuck. They're poor. They can't do anything for themselves, and that's not true. And we know all of these really amazing people in Guatemala that are starting these really awesome initiatives. I mean, it takes a lot of bravery to say, like, I see this problem and I'm going to start my own company, or I'm going to develop my own NGO because I believe that I can fix this thing. And we're seeing that, and we think that those people deserve the attention, and we think that in terms of being able to solve the problems in these rural communities that don't have access, you know, if we make a documentary that tells the same story, then there's no reason to show it to those communities, because obviously they know the problem. They're living it every day. But if we want to, like Alvaro said, start a movement and really start to take steps forward, then the best option is to show solutions and not just continue to show the same problem. Because I think also part of it is that there's, in a certain sense, a lack of awareness in the rural communities. Is that, you know, people are now that plastic has become so standard, you know, there's people that are like in their 20s or 30s who have basically grown up with plastic their entire lives, and they're just used to seeing it all over. They don't even maybe remember what it was like anymore when the land was pristine. And so I think that showing them that this isn't necessarily the way that it has to be, and there's already people in your country that are starting to put together solutions, is, I mean, I hope it's going to be interesting. And I hope it's going to be interesting to people here who, because I also think, this is the last thing I'll say, is that there's a lot of people here in the U.S. that don't really think about the plastic, because it's so easy to just like buy your chips and buy your soda and put it in the recycling and think that you have done a really good thing because you've recycled it. But like, where is that recycling going? And if you really start to investigate, unfortunately, a big % of our recycling here, even in DC, isn't actually recycled. It's all sent to the landfill. And so becoming more aware here about what we can do with the trash and about the magnitude of the problem, I think, is also a first step for us to start to reevaluate our own behavior, because I think it's too easy to just feel good because you've bought your soda and you've put it in the recycling.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Someone else?
How do you
You're good.
Hi, so I'm Nathaniel Shaw. So is it just the rural communities in Guatemala that have this problem?
No, actually it's countrywide. The main source of trash is obviously Guatemala City. They have the city has the biggest landfill in all Central America, and actually a watershed, it's going near the landfill, the Guatemala City landfill, and it's carrying all this trash to Honduras, to the coast of Honduras, and it's a lot. ¿Cómo se dice demanda?
Like the Honduras is like suing
Yeah.
Guatemala basically, because the trash from the Guatemala City dump is running down from this river, and it's coming out on the coast of Honduras, and it's like contaminating all of their beautiful tourist beaches.
Yeah, and Honduras has these like crystal water beaches, right? So Honduras is trying to blame Guatemala because this problem, but everybody knows that it's not such like a country problem. All Central America has the same problem, and it's really interesting how now two countries are fighting to each other because this problem.
Yeah.
So it's really
When we were researching for the video, we were looking at some statistics, and it says that 85% of the trash that's produced in Guatemala is not treated. So in the U.S., we have like standards for our landfills. When you build a landfill, you have to put like layers of, like, you put tarp and you put certain like layers in to protect the the dirt,
Soil.
the soil around the landfill, and to make sure that none of like the decomposing trash is leaching into the groundwater and contaminating it. But there's a lot of corruption in Guatemala, and so a lot of that money that should be designated for public funds is taken by public officials, and so there's no money left to like build a proper landfill. So the landfill that Alvaro is talking about in Guatemala City is the biggest dump in all of Central America, but it has no treatment. There's just like a few private landfills in the country that have actual treatment. So in Guatemala City, which is the biggest city, there's like 4 million people that live there, maybe.
More.
And they're producing obviously much more trash than in the rural areas. The difference is that in the city, there's trash collection services. So there's a truck that comes around and picks up at least some of the trash, so it doesn't look, and it's not like so much open space like mountains, right? So it doesn't look as dirty. But if you go to this dump, it's like this massive, massive dump. Whereas in the rural areas, the trash is sort of more everywhere. So it's the same problem, but it's visually it's different. I think in the city, it's a little bit more like a problem of the government, because the government isn't doing the job that they're supposed to do in terms of like the best way to manage the landfill. Whereas in the rural communities, it's also a problem of the government, but it's like the government is really small. They don't have any power. They don't have any money. And then the larger government isn't like bringing them the services that they need.
Yeah, and the rural places also is like the people used to burn their trash in the backyard, right? It was like the easiest way to get rid of your trash. But 15 years ago was like all the leaves from your tree that were like in the trash can, or I don't know, like
more,
organic,
more natural wrappings,
organic trash. So they used to burn all that, but right now, if you try to burn all your trash, it's all these toxics from the plastic, and it's difficult to decide if you want all this plastic or burning and make it worse for your family, because all these toxins are going in the air. So it's really difficult to decide. Mm-hmm.
So, like in Guatemala City, so when they put the trash in that dump, does it just like sit there and they don't do anything with it?
So actually interesting, and sorry, I think I interrupted you,
Okay.
but interesting is that one of the NGOs, the nonprofit organizations that we're hoping to feature in the film, is called Camino Seguro, and they have they support families that live around the dump and actually make a living from the dump. So even though there's no like formal recycling system and maybe there's no treatment, these like trash scavengers, their work is that they go to the dump and they look for metals, they look for plastics, they basically look for anything that could have some value, and they take it out and then they sell it. I guess on some sort of like black market, or I don't know exactly where they sell it, but they make a living from the dump, and this NGO is supporting them in terms of helping them get education, helping them get like safety equipment like gloves, because we're talking about people that maybe don't even have shoes that are going in the dump to basically make a living for their family. And then there's another arm of that organization, which is teaching women how to build how to make like bracelets and other artisan kinds of things that then they can sell to a more tourist or higher class market and make a living, which sounds interesting. I've heard sort of mixed reviews that some women haven't been able to make as much money like making these artisanias as they have picking up trash. So that's also sort of like an interesting paradigm of like which is better. I forgot the rest of the question.
Yeah, these women are making jewelry out of trash, and it's really interesting. There's NGOs helping them to start to building their own business, and the NGOs help them to design a logo, to put it in a really nice display, and the women are selling their jewelry through these markets, and you can find some of this jewelry in the highest malls in Guatemala City. So it's one way to create an economy out of trash.
But I think as for like the rest of the trash that goes in the landfill, I mean, as far as I know, it just sits there. The stuff that's not like scavenged, it just sits there and it starts to rot, and it's creating, it's like contaminating the waters, and some of those shots in that video that came from the newspaper in Guatemala are like of that river where all the trash is going to Honduras, and it's obviously really contaminated. Yeah. So.
And like, when do you think this problem really starts to take shape?
When did the problem start?
When this started?
Yeah.
Well, since the plastic became more normal, because actually in Guatemala there's like the roots of Mayan culture. Of course, they didn't have any plastic in like 20 years ago. If you go buy some things like your tortillas, for example, they use like a banana leaves to wrap their products, and they use like different type of fibers to build their own baskets, to make their own bags or any other product that you can find it on plastic or made out of some materials related to plastic. So I think this problem became really big in the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, I have noticed the beaches, for example, are like so filled with plastic. I used to go to, my family has a small house in the beach, and 10 years ago when I used to go running barefoot, and you know, in the beach, and was barely any plastic, and today you can give a step without touching a piece of plastic. It's really bad. So I think in 10 years have become really bad.
One of the things that we're hoping to do in the documentary is touch a little bit more on the Mayan culture, because in Guatemala I think like 70% of the population is of Mayan descent, and so they still wear like really traditional colorful clothing, and in the smaller communities there's a lot of like traditionally rooted practices, and some of them are being lost as the world becomes smaller, like with TV and internet, and now the influx of like westernized products like plastic bags. And so some of these practices, like wrapping your tortillas in a banana leaf instead of wrapping them in a plastic bag, are being lost. And so we want to find some people, maybe like community elders that remember what it was like before, that can talk a little bit about the way that the Mayan spirituality plays into use of natural products versus like just adopting these more Western products just because society tells you, that's what should be used. And then I think just as a side note, Alvaro and I have had some really interesting conversations in the past couple of weeks as we've been talking to more people about what we're doing, like with my parents and friends of my parents and asking them, well, what was it like when you were kids? Like, do you remember plastic in your house? And if you ask your parents, like they didn't have plastic when they were growing up. The milk came in like glass jugs, was delivered to the house. Those jugs were returnable. I mean, I think that my mom said like maybe there was tin foil, but there wasn't so much plastic. And so as, you know, technology has developed these new products and commercialized them, we've been sort of brainwashed through TV and through advertising to think that these are the only products that we need. But, you know, if you step back and you think, well, like, what is a plastic and how does a plastic decompose? There's like a whole cycle behind it that nobody is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The other way.
Hi, my name's Keely Sacker. I'm a junior with our student newspaper. So you mentioned that you want to start a solution. What are your ideas for feasible sustainability practices in Guatemala?
I think that the first step is just evaluating what's already happening. So some of what's happening is like NGOs and individuals are starting to build foundations out of recycled plastic bottles. Some are promoting the use of reusable bags. Some are starting to pass laws. What else? Other people are developing like trash collection systems at small scale. I think that for us, for Alvaro and I think that the biggest goal out of this documentary in terms of being able to take a big step forward is just to develop even a platform where these people can start to communicate with each other, because there's lots of really really interesting people doing lots of innovative activities, but they don't know who the other people are because they're stuck in their own, maybe they know people who live in their same county, but they certainly don't know somebody who lives on the other side of the country. So I think for us, at least for me, I think that the biggest step forward would be just to start to build somehow a platform where these different people can start to talk to each other and get a better sense of what's going on.
Yeah. I think that Guatemala culture is completely different than the US. So what it works the most is when you create an economy around it. So for example, if people has to pay like $2 or $3 for a plastic bag, what do you think will happen?
They won't be using as many plastic bags.
Exactly. So creating this economy around the plastic that is already there will be a correction. How you call it? Like a correct
solution.
A solution, but you're correcting the problem, right? You're working after the problem to correct it. There is a pre-solution that could be like the education, right? So you put all this information in the schools, giving the kids like enough, I don't know how to say, como
like the resources.
Enough resources for them to be aware and in this problem. And there's the main solution for us will be, as I said, the economic solution, because there is some organizations giving books or notebooks and pencils to the Guatemalan families if they bring plastic bottles filled with more plastic as an interchange of, instead of money, you pay with plastic to get some benefits, And that's working a lot right now. That's really popular right now. So I think when families need to collect this plastic and make an interchange for goods, they won't have like more plastic in their environment. They're gonna pick all of that. So
I think the biggest solution would be to target the companies that are producing so much plastic, like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and there's other Guatemalan companies that are also producing plastic. But I think that it's challenging for us to say, like, with this documentary, we're just going to reach all of the corporations and they're going to change their mind and they're not going to produce any more plastic. But, we're hoping that this is also a first step in building awareness in the general population that, these are companies that are, taking your water, basically, to make their plastics, and these factories that are damaging to the environment that's ultimately affecting, your livelihood, which is like a whole nother tangent that we could talk about. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Katherine Connor. I'm part of the TC student newspaper. I was wondering, you were talking about a lot of the solutions, both here in America and in Guatemala. What are some of the ways that TC students can learn from the mistakes in Guatemala's waste management in order to improve our own waste management and protect our watersheds as well?
For me, the first step is just being aware of what you're consuming and starting to think, what if you saved your trash for an entire day or an entire week to think about what am I actually using? Because it's natural as a human being to just say, well, like, I'm better than this problem. I'm not really using any trash. Like, my impact on the world is really small. But the risk, I think, that we have here in the U.S. is that we have more resources. We have more purchasing power than people that are living in developing countries that have a smaller economy. So it's easier for us to like discount the purchase of a coffee, or to discount, like, I went to buy my lunch and it came, wrapped in stuff that I'm just gonna like eat, the container that I'm gonna eat out of, and then immediately throw it away. So I think, the first step would be, here in the school, for example, you could run a campaign about like how to reduce the waste in the school, how to be aware. You could have like a competition about like who is the student that provides like the least amount of waste. I think, also talking to people that are outside of your immediate social circle, like people that are older than you, about changing their behavior. So one of the things that we put on our Kickstarter is that for anybody who donated $250 or more, we were going to give them like a zero waste consultation, where basically as a thank you for their donation, we're going to have a phone call with them where we can talk about like ideas for how you and your household could reduce your waste. So if you tell me like I go to the grocery store, I buy my rice and I buy my beans and I buy them all in plastic bags, like I might say, well, like you could buy them in bulk. You could bring like a reusable bag, you know, instead of buying your coffee every day, you could get a reusable mug. And like, you know, they're really simple solutions, but when you start to think, I don't have a reusable mug, so every day I buy my coffee in a paper cup and throw it away, like that's not plastic, but that's a huge impact on the environment. That's like the oil that it took, that you had to take out of the ground to make those cups that you're basically just using for 5 seconds and throwing them away.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, on social media and on the internet, there's lots of ideas for interesting campaigns around, like, there's a whole zero waste movement about, like, basically like minimizing your environmental impact until you get to, like, as small as possible. There's families that exist, I don't know them personally, but that produce, like, only a mason jar of waste, like, in an entire year, which is, I mean, that's, like, a huge goal, right?
Yeah, I think for example, in the big supermarkets here, there's options for you to bring your own bags and shop bulk. For example, you buy your rice and you bring your own bag. So there's solutions already happening, and I think the more aware we are, before you buy anything, try to choose the product that is not plastic. For example, milk. You can find milk in PET bottles, right? But next to the PET bottle is like a cardboard box that you can buy. So those little things makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And also kind of tying into that, you were talking about how, and on your website also I saw that you're kind of worried that the communities won't be like receptive to the waste as a problem, and therefore won't be super receptive to the solutions as well. How can we as TC students kind of make our peers more aware and more receptive to the solutions and knowing waste is a problem?
You answer?
That's a good question. I think you have to be careful. You have to be really careful about the way that you approach the subject. Not everybody is like ready to change immediately, and the first step is awareness and is starting to understand the problem. So, you know, instead of like ostracizing your friends for like, why would you use that plastic container? Like, you're so stupid. Like, you know, the first step is like, you know, have you thought about that straw that's in your drink? Like, you know, they say that straw is like the #1 plastic product that's going into landfills in the world, and that like a lot of the plastic that's in the ocean is like actually pieces of straws. And like a straw is something that you never think about. How many straws do they give out in the cafeteria here every day? You know, maybe you could just even start to run like a little bit of awareness about, you know, small things, because every small step is like it has the potential to make a really big impact. But I think you have to, you know, like anything you do, you have to be sensitive about the way that you approach it. In Guatemala, I think that the risk comes, you know, in the same way that it does here, like from a lack of awareness and a lack of understanding about what the problem is. And but I think that the difference is that here in the U.S. is like a general awareness that trash is bad and don't contaminate your environment and put things in the trash can. And for me, the bigger problem here is really that there's like that there's consumption out of control, but also that there's like, I've put my stuff, like this idea that I've put my stuff in the trash can and it's no longer my problem. Whereas in Guatemala, there's more just like that level of consciousness doesn't exist, because what is the point of having a trash can if nobody is ever coming to pick up the trash? And so I think that, you know, the level of awareness is in different places, but I think just, you know, be sensitive, repeat the message, try to be on top of yourself, and, you know, try to remember, you know, that my goal is not to use a straw. My goal is not to use a disposable lunch stuff or disposable coffee cup. And you know, slowly those messages repeated will eventually start to take waves with other people around you. But it's a process.
Yeah, and the media and the newspaper are really powerful to get this message out there. So the more you can get involved in different different organizations that are working here in the city, dealing with this problem and put it out there is the best thing to do.
Even inside the school itself, like thinking, you know, what is the cafeteria using? I don't know what other kinds of, you know, activities you have here, but, you know, what are the products that you guys are purchasing that are the most in the school? And is there a way to make those products more eco-friendly? And could be interesting to do an investigation of, like, where does the recycling from the school go? Like, does it actually make it into the recycling stream? And, like, I don't know. I think in a lot of places it might not. And same with the trash. Like, how much trash are we producing as a school? And are we composting our trash? I think you guys have a school garden here. You know, like, it could be really cool to start a composting program here if there isn't one, and use that compost from the cafeteria to go back into the vegetables. So I think, you know, once you start to think outside of the box, there's a lot of really cool things you can do. But like anything, it's a process. It's not all going to happen overnight. And you guys, as like the older students in the school, have the ability to be the leaders and to start to make change.
Thank you so much. It's really helpful.
Folks,
All right.
time for one more.
All right.
Who's got the best?
Oh, wait, did you? Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. So since you guys lived in Guatemala and saw what was happening over there, how does it feel to finally bring a solution to the table?
Well, we're not bringing the solution. We're bringing a collective knowledge of solutions here. So it took us a lot of, you know, like coming and going about what we going to show in the documentary, because as we said, you could just talk about the problem, but our main goal and what we can give to the community is bringing all this information from the US, from Europe. They are way ahead of the curve in Europe about this situation, and we want to bring all this knowledge to Guatemala and start like making connections in between organizations to be able to address the problem.
But I think, you know, if anything, like for me personally, it's a little bit scary. Like, I'm really excited. Alvaro and I, we talked about this idea for like 5 years before we finally had the courage to say, like, okay, we're going to do it. You know, I had a full-time job here in DC that I just quit to go do this. And the world says, like, you should just go to your office and you should like sit at your desk and you should make your salary and you shouldn't like question that because you have health benefits and you have like all the security that you need. And so I think, you know, this is something that Alvaro and I, we really felt like we had to do, and we were talking about it, and finally one day we looked at each other and we said, like, okay, either we're going to do it or we have to stop talking because like it's too much. And so, you know, we're super excited. We feel like this is what we have to do, but I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's also like a little bit scary. And now we have all of these people. We have almost 150 people who have donated a little bit to our Kickstarter, and now we have to deliver a product to them. And, you know, hopefully we're going to be able to deliver something that's good.
And the donations that we had is not only the money. Every time that somebody donated, wrote us like 2 pages of what they think about the problem and how we are addressing something like they have been thinking to do before. So it's not just they gave the money for the Kickstarter to be able to make this documentary. They feel engaged in this problem. So, and with that being said, I think we reach a small part of our goal, you know, getting people involved in this subject.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Let's give one last round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
And just keep rolling. That'll be that. Hey, thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for having us.
Our TV program did that, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. Same transition.
Same transition.